Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And we have our good friend, David Rosenfelt here. We're talking about his brand new book, Dog Eat Dog. David was kind enough to sign a batch of books for us. And let me see if I can get to the title page. Here we go. There's his signature, very stylized signature. And I'll go ahead and put a link to the buy link in the comments field for you if you're interested in one of our signed copies. And I'll be monitoring, as always, the comments field. So if you have questions for David, don't be shy. Put them in there. Ask him about greyhounds and pugs and all sorts of other breeds. And Barbara, of course, is standing by in her, looks like her office today. It's at the office of the library. It's the office. And she'll be doing the program, but I'll be summoned back in a bit to ask some of your questions. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well, David, what a treat to see you. A toast to you. I'm not up for alcohol quite yet, so I'm drinking tea.
Do you think that book jacket is too sophisticated?
You know, every time your book jacket is, you mean the dog glugging the donuts?
Yeah, maybe too upscale, I think.
Well, you know, really to fit this book, the dog should be attacking a lobster.
Dog should be attacking a lobster.
Yeah, I mean, come on, lobsters and lobster rolls are an integral part of this book. So I think they dropped the ball when they didn't have, you know, a lobster claw for him to be gnawing on.
They do the book jacket well before I even write the book. So they would have had no idea that there were lobster rolls in the book when they did the jacket.
Well, if you had taken Andy from New Jersey to Canada because of the Tim Horton book chain, then he could have been gorging on donuts instead of lobster rolls throughout the investigation, and then this cover would actually have fit. Have you been to Canada and been to Tim Hortons? It's a donut paradise.
No. We have a Tim Hortons here also. No, I haven't been there.
Very dangerous. Anyway, this delightful book is the 23rd in the Andy Carpenter, the professionally retired attorney, as we now know him, series. And it's just one of my favorites. I can hardly wait every year to get an advanced reading copy, which is what this is, of David's books. In addition to the 23 Andy Carpenters, of which Dog Eat Dog is the most recent, he's written 2 novels and a spinoff called The K-Team, where some of the Andy Carpenter characters have their own possibly sober investigation. I'm not really entirely sure why the K-Team is the K-Team. Maybe you can explain that to me.
It's named the K-Team?
No, why you spun it off. I mean, it's just, you know, it's really
pure greed, nothing but greed. Trust me.
okay. Because it's Laurie and it's I'm trying to remember the name. I'm having a blank. Marcus and at least one other person who
Laurie is the main character.
Okay. They're habitual offenders in the Andy Carpenter series. So anyway, there they are. And he's written 9 standalone thrillers, which I have always enjoyed. And, you know, despite all David's disclaimers, he's really a very clever plotter. So not only are they fun to read, great characters, good landscapes, and lots of humor, but they're really very cleverly plotted. I think you excelled yourself in this one. I really love the way you structured this book.
Okay, good. Thanks. I'm glad. Glad to hear it.
Well, so what we have is Andy, a New Jersey native. As always, he gets into a case. Tell us how he gets into the case, because it always involves a dog.
Yeah, most of the time. Starting with book 6, actually, it was the first time a dog got him into the case. And I think, except for a couple, they've all been that way ever since. And in this case, he and Laurie are walking their dogs in Patterson, and they see a guy kicking a dog, his own dog, a guy kicking his dog. And of course, Andy's frozen in place, but Laurie runs across the street to intervene. And somebody else, a stranger, intervenes before she does and beats the guy. And the police, so they could sort it out, take them both into custody. And Andy, of course, is impressed that this guy did what he did for a dog. And it turns out that the guy's wanted for 2 murders in Maine.
Yes, well, and recklessly intervened in a dog beating. So already there's a contradiction there, right? Between a guy who's wanted for 2 murders and a guy that's willing to save a dog.
and it gives him major points in Andy's eyes. So Andy, after some resistance, although less than usual in his case, goes up to Maine to defend them.
Absolutely true. If he doesn't kick and scream, as he often does, I think he is really impressed. I also think, it was a little embarrassing that Lori rushed to throw herself into, the fray while Andy stood on the curb. So, maybe he felt that he needed to step up here and be more of a champion after that performance.
It's possible, but I think he's used to being the coward in the family.
Okay. Well, and so one of the great things about this book is that Andy up in Maine is constantly being accused by the Maine natives about bringing his sophisticated and elite New Jersey ways into Maine to play. And I mean, that's really sort of fun because you don't normally think of elites in New Jersey.
Right, and the people in Maine can't distinguish between New York and New Jersey. For them, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that gives them an opportunity to, well, they want to resist. And because the guy whose name is escaping me, what's his name?
Which guy are you talking about?
One wanted for murder.
I have no idea.
Matthew Jansen. Okay. Because Matthew Jansen is being transported to Maine, where he's going to stand trial, Andy is not going to be able to defend him should he decide to do that in New Jersey. He's going to have to go up to Maine. And in order to do that, to do his work, he's going to have to hire an attorney in Maine who's licensed to practice in Maine. So already we've expanded the team to include a Maine lawyer who wasn't really anxious to sign on.
No, because of course the case is open and shut against Andy's client, and it was a fairly brutal execution style murder of two people, and the guy has no money to pay legal fees. So those three things in combination don't exactly make it an appealing case for a local lawyer. But Andy uses them to get into the case. You have to have a local attorney put you up for for a one-time only admission to the courtroom. And this guy stays on, although Andy does, I just use him to have some funny lines, but Andy basically does the whole case.
Well, that's pretty true. I mean,
the team come up there.
Yeah, Andy could, if he had a number of cases, he could actually work to get himself admitted to practice in Maine. But for a one-off case, it's not really going to be worth all that. Plus, there's the time problem because this case, you've sort of set a ticking clock up in this case. There's not a lot of time for Andy to gather up a defense team and try to figure out what to do.
Yeah, that's a problem I have all the time, because despite the fact that how ridiculous some of these stories might be, I try and be realistic about some things. And one of them is the fact that, and they have this problem on Law and Order and every courtroom drama that's ever been written, but these cases take a long time to play out. And I truncate that. I mean, I can't have Andy sit up there for 8 months. First of all, Ricky, his son, is in camp in Maine. So they need to finish it during the summer. But it's hard because, generally it takes months and months. And in these cases, it has to go much faster.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I think the reader's okay with that. And in point of fact, when it all comes up, Lori was Andy really wanted to take Ricky to camp in Maine. But since he has to dart off to defend Matthew Jansen, Lori is going to take Ricky to camp in Maine.
Right.
So Andy's on his own when he goes up there. And he's a bit uncomfortable, isn't he, without his usual support at the outset. He
is, especially when he starts to get in some danger.
Well, and he compensates for that by checking into an inn in this charming town and goes out foraging and sees that there's a hugely popular place for lobster rolls. But Andy's not one to stand in line behind like 22 people. So he finds another supply of lobster rolls, another source for lobster rolls. And that becomes his sustenance throughout the book. I mean, he just lives on lobster rolls. I think it's fabulous. I have a husband who would do that if he could.
That popular place is real up here. It's called Red's Eats. And you can't drive by there and not see 30 people in line at any point during any day. And they charge about, I think this year, $36 for a lobster roll. And the lines are around the block. It's mind boggling. And a place across the street which serves the same lobster can't get arrested. It's weird.
$36 for a lobster roll? Are you kidding me?
And at a stand, it's not a restaurant. You stand at a counter, an outdoor counter, and get your lobster roll and walk away.
So let's describe lobster rolls. My husband, who spent a lot of time as a kid on Martha's Vineyard, but also in Maine, is a real lobster fan. So we spent the 4th of July in Wyoming with author friends, and Rob ordered a complete Maine dinner, which was several lobsters, blueberry pie, moon pies, the chocolate ones with the marshmallows in them. And it came with 6 lobster rolls are basically sort of like a hot dog bun, but square and a little bit richer. So it came with the buns and so forth. So the object is that you cook the lobsters, which are live in, a container when they fly in, because they're flown in. You cook the lobster and eat the lobster, and then all the remains you turn into lobster roll. So David, what's the magic recipe for lobster rolls? Because it's really simple.
I'm embarrassed to say I'd never eat them, right? But it's, I mean, it's fairly simple. It's mayonnaise and lobster and I guess lettuce and whatever. I honestly never eat them. In fact, I never ate lobsters for years. And to show you how little I knew about them, when we decided, we were in California and it was decided that we'd be moving to Maine. And friends of ours from Boston, as a welcome gesture, sent us to California. They sent us a box of lobsters, okay? And I was horrified to find out that they were alive, right? I was just out of control. So Debbie had to cook them while I drove around the neighborhood because I didn't want to be there when she killed the lobsters. So that's how much I know about lobsters.
I sympathize with that. When Rob pulled them out of the water and he has his pot boiling over there, he actually said to me, should I kill them before I drop them in the boiling water? To which I said resoundingly, yes. I mean, how cruel. I'm not prepared to drop a live lobster into boiling water. I think that's awful. But anyway, a lobster roll, as far as I can work out, is chopped lobster meat. And really, it's either Hellman's or Best Food mayonnaise, although I guess you could make your own. But anyway, I'm a big fan of Hellman's mayonnaise for this endeavor. And you just split the roll and you can toast it if you want to. And then you just fill it up with lobster meat and mayonnaise. So it's basically like a lobster hot dog. And it's very plain, but lobster itself is pretty rich. So, and you add the mayonnaise, it's delicious. So Andy, how many lobster rolls does he eat in this book? I mean, he eats dozens.
He eats quite a few. And so, here in Maine, you can get them in gas stations. They're everywhere because the lobster industry, especially where I live, is huge.
Right. And that's why I can't understand why it's $36 for a lobster roll, because I think that, if I looked at the 2.5 or 3 meals we had off this imported, to Wyoming deal of lobsters, it certainly wasn't going to approach anything like $36, per. So good for them if they're able to do that. That almost feels like sticking it to the tourists.
Unfortunately, they, with the sea warming, the lobsters that were south of us, like in Massachusetts, can't take the warmer water, and they've moved up here. And eventually the lobsters here are going to move up to Canada.
They will, or Greenland or whatever it is, which is now becoming a tourist destination. I can hardly believe that. I've been to Greenland 4 times, and the first time you could barely get a tow on the very southern tip of Greenland, and now you can cruise all the way around it. So people who think that climate change and warming isn't real are clearly not traveling, or they would figure that out. Anyway, so here's Andy. He's now ensconced, and unfortunately, in the place that he has ensconced himself, there are a number of either large rooms or suites. And so this money is no obstacle for Andy in terms of his own comfort. He rents some pretty palatial quarters, and eventually Lori and Marcus and some of the team motor on up to Maine and join him. And it's a good thing that Marcus comes, because Andy is potentially in danger in this book several times, maybe even more than usual.
Yeah, I mean, it's a limit to how many times I can get a lawyer's to be having, under threat of death. But I seem to wind up that way every time. But yes, it's done in a different way here. I think the whole thing is fresher because I took it out of New Jersey once. I had only taken the books out of New Jersey once before in a book called Dead Center in Wisconsin. And it was enjoyable for me to write. And of course, I know Maine because I live here. So I think it freshened it up some.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is one of my very favorite books. I mean, the predicament that you put Matthew Jansen in, having, set him up to be a defender of dogs, is one that you just can't imagine how there's any way out for him. I wish we could talk about the whole book and the ending. We can't, or well, both of us be murdered. But it's an excellent plot and not easy to see where it's going. So I really like that, but it's also really funny. I mean, your books are always humorous, but I do think the play between Maine and New Jersey, there's a lot of extra humor that you're able to work in.
It'll probably get my neighbors to hate me when and if they read it. But
I don't know. I think you're perfectly kind to Maine. I mean, aside, you didn't even mention the outrageous $36 price for lobster rolls. You were very, very good. I thought you made Maine sound really enticing.
It's a great,
yeah.
Yeah, it really is a great place.
It is a great place. And maybe Andy, now that he's got an ally there, maybe he'll be summoned to take another case in Maine, because the lawyer that he works with, who's really fun and very reluctant at the outset, but eventually gets into the whole thing. Who knows? Maybe he'll have a case and he'll call Andy back.
When Andy was in Wisconsin in Dead Center, he had a local lawyer with him then also. And I think it's the favorite character I've ever written. And I very stupidly killed him off in that book. And I would have brought him back immediately, and I just stupidly did it. In fact, in the first draft, he died like on page 100. And the publisher, my editor liked it so much that we let him live another 100 pages so we could have more fun with him, right? So, but I never should have killed him. Never should have killed him. He was a great character.
Well, he was a great character, but to be realistic, Andy was only in Wisconsin because Lori had gone there in order to take, a job independent of Andy. I mean, she split up with him and taken a job as police chief. And
I could have had the guy move to New Jersey. He was terrific. He was terrific. I love this guy.
You certainly could have, but I mean, I never thought that there was going to be a second book in Wisconsin, because the whole point of it was Andy going to, see Lori and persuade her to move back to New Jersey. But Maine has real potential here. I mean, it's certainly possible that you could do more with Maine, because Andy isn't there for personal reasons. He's there, to defend this guy.
Right. The problem with taking Andy out of his environment is you have to move the whole crew, and you have Ricky, and so it becomes unwieldy. But he may be back. He was here once before on a case, but as part of an investigation.
I think, because Ricky is a part of the family group, and because he's a kid, I thought it was clever the way you sidelined him. You really need to do that if his parents are going to be involved in an investigation out of town. So sending Ricky to camp is a really good answer to, what to do with the kid.
He's 12 years old. Maybe I'll make him really smart and go to college. You think he's ready for college?
Early admissions to Harvard. You could do that. Indeed. He's not quite there yet. But, another couple of years, he's in high school. He could be left on his own for short periods of time, or he could go help out at the dog shelter and hang out, with the people running that.
Right.
He could have a job, at the center.
And Andy now has 3 dogs, which is becoming unwieldy on its own. He's starting to be more and more like me as we go along.
So we forever have Tara, and now we have Sebastian, right?
Right. And it's spoiler alert, he gets another dog in this book.
He does. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how it is with dogs that are, need homes. Somebody should take them in. We have a rescue dog. You have multiple rescue dogs. Patrick, who's going to join us, has had at least one rescue greyhound. It's kind of hard to resist dogs that need you.
I'm aware.
So you're going to have a K-Team book out in the spring?
Yeah, first there's another Andy coming out in October.
Ah, the Christmas Andy.
Christmas Andy, and it's finished mercifully.
Yay.
And then I'm in the middle of a K-Team book right now for March. And then I've signed for more 3 books each year. So there'll be another Andy next July, another Christmas Andy.
Well, I'm always comforted to hear that. I want you to get to at least 25, Andy, so I can look a couple of years more ahead. Tell us about the Christmas Andy. What's the cover? Because that always is the key to the Christmas book.
The title is called Best in Snow. Get it? And I forget. It's a dog. It's like a golden retriever puppy running in the snow.
Oh, okay. That sounds adorable. So is there a show like Westminster involved? I mean, is this a dog show book or you just
No,
no?
but there is snow involved.
Okay. Well, it's a Christmas book, so I can imagine that. It snows in New Jersey after all.
Yes, and it starts with Tara. Andy was walking Tara, and she digs up a body. She runs. Andy thinks it's a squirrel, and she runs in the snow, and she starts digging, and all of a sudden they see a human hand, and that's how we get into the story. It's another elegant, classy opening.
So, I try to envision you sitting around and, dog-related murders just seem to sort of spring from your head like Athena, with wisdom spouting out of her. How do you do that? Has it just become a habit?
How do I come up with ideas for a book?
I mean, I can just see you churning out, dog-related crime stories.
Honestly, don't do any churning whatsoever. It just doesn't work that way. What happens is the publisher tells me that they need a concept for the book for the following year to go in their catalog.
Okay.
So what I come up with is basically the beginning, which is how a dog gets him into the case or how he gets into the case if the dog's not involved. And that's it. And then I have nothing else until I start the book and proceed as I go. So there's never a eureka moment where I get an idea. It honestly goes from page to page. And sometimes the characters, what they say, tell me where it should go next. So I wish, particularly today, because I'm struggling with where the book should go next, I wish there was like an idea. What happens is, I mean, I can't outline, I've said that a million times to you, but I almost don't want to, because I once wrote a mini series for NBC, which fortunately for NBC never saw the light of day. But what happens is when you write a mini series for television as opposed to a TV movie, you have to do what they call a Bible, which is everything that's going to be in that script has to be in this outline. The outline is really in prose, but it's got to be 50, 60 pages long of everything that's going to be in that movie. And what happened, so I did that, and it was torture for me to do because I really can't do it well. And they approved it, but then in the writing, it had no spontaneity at all. I was like transcribing what was in the Bible with some dialogue onto the page, and it really didn't work at all. And I think that's what would happen if I tried to come up with an outline, or even if I tried to adapt a book to a screenplay. I think the same thing would happen.
Yeah, but there's something in your brain that once you get going, it seems to sort of spin out. I mean, in this particular book, did you have any idea how the ending of this book was going to play when you started it?
Oh, I had no idea what the crime was. Well, I mean, I knew that he was wanted for murder, but I had no idea what the backstory was on why he was set up and what the real crime was. I had no idea whatsoever. I usually don't know who the bad guy is until page 200,
But this is a pretty elaborate story. So, did you have to like backtrack after you got to where you wanted to go? Did you have to go back and put some things in to make it make sense?
I always have to put some things in, but not many things. And in this time, no more than usual. I'm actually usually surprised by how complex, and I don't mean that necessarily in a positive way, but how complex the plots are.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes too much so. Sometimes there's too many characters. I'm often surprised by that.
Well, I'm really astonished that you don't have to go back and bolster, you know, the end that you've created, because if you don't know where you're going, then it's hard to put up all those roadblocks, or road marks.
I
But
know.
maybe if you do them, you generate the ending.
I mean, I'll go back, and if the guy who's the ultimate murderer, you know, I had him in Europe at the time in an earlier, you know, passage, I have to change that. But it doesn't usually happen. In fact, I have this weird, ridiculous thing about me, and that is, once I write something in the book, it's in the book. So I've never, for instance, in all those books, I've never written a scene that didn't make it into the final book. I've never taken a scene out.
Wow.
It becomes like a piece of the puzzle. So, you know, and I know it's stupid because I know it's my book. I can take it out if I want, right? And then it'll be easier to solve the puzzle. But I just seem to not be able to do that. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I had a great conversation yesterday with David Bell and JT Ellison, and the title of David's new book is "Kill All Your Darlings," which is advice that is often, you know, has been given to writers about editing out stuff that the author wrote in and loved, but doesn't really advance the plot, or doesn't enhance the book, or makes it too long, or whatever. And so, you know, that seems to be something many authors wind up having to do. But that's so interesting that you don't.
I usually, what I'll do is when I'm 50 pages in or 100 pages in and so on, I'll go back and like mold it and make the sentences better. But it's always adding. It's rarely, or changing. It's rarely subtracting. I mean, it's never subtracting scenes, but it's rarely subtracting. I'm usually trying to make it funnier, that kind of thing.
Right. So do you like polishing? Do you like going back and, you know, making sure that the words are exactly what you want them to be?
Yeah. Yes, only because it means I don't have to be figuring out what happens next, right? It's like a respite from worrying about what's going to happen next. That's the only thing that bothers me. If I knew what was going to happen next, I could write a book in a week if I was able to always know what's next, but I can't. And it sometimes aggravates me that I can't, because you can't type, you know, if you don't know what the scene is. So,
well, that's certainly true. But, you know, but you write books remarkably fast anyway. I mean, one of the things we've talked about over all these years, because we've been doing this for 23 books now, is, you know, how quickly you're actually able to put a book together, as opposed to other people who struggle for a year or more.
the trick is quantity, not quality, Barbara.
That's not true. I mean, you know, I'm not a pushover. I really like your books. I think they are funny. I think they're well plotted. You know, somehow or other, you seem to be able to blend quality and speed in a remarkably professional way.
I can be really fast when I apply myself. My problem is I'll take a month off and you know, so on. But once the deadline is coming, then it just comes out. I'm in that mode right now on the next book.
I think your subconscious must be on super drive all the time. You know, even if you don't recognize it, there's no way that you could just spew this out if you didn't have a constant churning going on in your head.
My head's empty, Barbara. I'm telling you.
It's not. Turn sideways so I can look at your ear.
There's nothing there, believe me.
I'm going to take a flashlight one day, turn him sideways, and see if I can point it out the other side. You're always self-deprecating, David, but you know, you really do have a remarkable talent, and you know, you wouldn't still be writing these books if they weren't great. I mean, no publisher would continue to publish them if people didn't love them. I wouldn't continue to read them if I were bored.
It's bizarre for me when they send me to galleys and I open the first couple of pages and it shows the list of books, previous books,
right?
It blows me away. I swear, I have no idea.
It now takes up. If you look, one whole page here and then part of a page there that David has written so many books.
It's amazing. I have not always been a writer. I mean, I spent most of my adult life as a movie executive. So it's amazing to me. Amazing.
Well, it's a joy to me. I'm really pleased about that. Patrick, you want to come join us and talk more about dogs? Patrick is a dog and a cat person.
Sure. Yeah. Well, David, what's going on with your brood right now?
Well, right now they're not around me because we're having a I think it's the remnants of the hurricane that hit Florida, and so we're having thunder. So you don't want to be in our house. So I'm in a guest house, but you don't want to be in a house when there's thunder. It's like those old movies where, World War I, we're in the foxholes and they're incoming, overhead. That's what it's like in our house during a thunderstorm or fireworks.
Wow.
So they're not around me now, but in the big picture, we have 12 right now.
Okay.
Which is an all-time low for us.
Do
Now,
they
do you-
tend to run away, not just to be terrified, but do they, because, they often tell you that like on Halloween or fireworks or whatever, dogs can vault walls and disappear.
When we first moved to Maine, just a couple of weeks after we got here, we rescued a golden retriever, a 5-year-old golden retriever who's still with us. And there was a thunderstorm, and we had no idea. He didn't like, he was afraid. So he went through my screen window, our nearest neighbors are a quarter of a mile away, ran down to their house and ran through their screen door into their house, right? To somebody we never met, right?
Oh, that was an introduction.
Yeah. So mercifully, he's almost deaf now, so he's not a problem. But
do thunder shirts help?
no, not us.
No.
Nothing helps.
Our greyhound used to get so upset, she would crawl into the tub and curl up into the tub.
Yeah, that's pretty common, actually.
Yeah, we have undershirts for both of our dogs. And the younger one doesn't seem to mind too much, but the older one, he would just tremble and be so upset. And you strap him into his thunder shirt and, kind of hold on to him.
I mean, we have three of our dogs are mastiffs, and the smallest of the three is 180 pounds. So you'd have to buy thunder shirts at the big and tall shop. To try and get it on them would be just an adventure that wouldn't be worth it.
Sure enough.
I do have some questions from the viewers here. Celeste, she says, all right, so 3 books at 6 weeks each. That does leave some time off in the year. So what do you do when you're not writing? Anything special? Do you like to go on vacation or?
Keep in mind, football season goes from September to January. So that takes a large chunk of time out. We used to travel a lot. The only vacations we do now for the most part are we go to New York, usually for a week every 6 weeks. Debbie actually goes more often than I do. And we haven't been doing it as much because there's no theater. We're theater junkies. So we'll go to New York for a week and see 8 plays. So
it becomes harder with all the dogs, I'm sure. It becomes quite a undertaking.
We have 2 women who come, and one's here all day and the other's here at night, and they're phenomenal. The dogs get better care when they're here than when we are. So we don't worry about it. It's perfect. It's a perfect setup. They're wonderful.
Let's see here. Kim, she says, I love your characters and I miss some who have moved on. Will Hike ever make another appearance?
Probably not. Hike, I sometimes have a tendency to substitute idiosyncrasies for character development. So Hike was, his main quality was what a pessimist he was. And it was funny. I thought it was really funny, but I probably was starting to beat it to death. So I had to move on. A character I liked better before him was Kevin. And I think he was Andy's second in command, and he made it to the 8th book. And now I have a guy named Eddie Dowd. But Andy does all the legal work. So basically, and I have to do things with the other characters. I have to keep them busy. So basically the second lawyer is not a key player. So I doubt Hike will come back.
Let's see. Oh, Mark DeCastrique, our friend. He says, do you work on more than 1 book at a time?
No, never. I can't. The closest I came was when I wrote Dog Tripping, and I think it was Unleashed. And I wrote them back to back. And maybe a little overlap, but they were so different. One was nonfiction, one was fiction, although they had the same voice. They had my voice. Andy's and my voice, I discovered at the time, was identical. So no, but I it's all I could do to keep the plot in my head for 1, so I cannot do 2.
He also asks, Mark does, do you plan to use your adopted state of Maine in more books?
Barbara was just suggesting that because Maybe, probably not. I guess it's possible down the road, this lawyer who we worked with could need him for something and he could come up there. That's probably a good idea, but it's a ways off if I do it.
Let's see here. Okay, Nancy, she says, I also love your books. I've only read a few, but I'm working my way through the series. How do you come up with the mysteries? Do you have a background in law or law enforcement?
I don't know how I come up with the mysteries, and I do not have a background in law and law enforcement.
Do you have any sources that you can go to when you have specific questions?
Yeah, I have a lawyer friend named Doug Burns and a couple other people I can ask. Basically, if I get to a spot where I don't know if what I'm about to do will pass the smell test, right? I mean, if Andy could really get away with it, that's basically the question I ask. So I think most of it is mine, but I'll ask some people some questions when I have specific questions.
Do you have trouble remembering some of the books? It seems like, I'm not being facetious here, but it seems like they're pure in the sense that they just come straight out of your subconscious and they're on the page, and then you're on to the next one.
I have no recollection of it at all. I finished Best in Snow, the Christmas Andy, a couple of months ago. And I then 2 weeks ago had an experience which I love having, right? It's like my favorite experience in writing. And they send me to galleys to proofread. And I read them like I'm reading it for the first time. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I laugh at the jokes. I have no idea what these books are about. I can't tell you as sitting here what that book is about. I can tell you how Andy got into the case, but I can't tell you what it's about. So no, I have absolutely no recollection of them at all.
You tap into some higher power that's probably a canine.
Right, exactly. a hairy higher power.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Let's see. Marianne says, are the usual Andy Carpenter characters, Edna, Willie, etc., in this new book, or are they back in Patterson?
I
can't remember.
Edna and Willie are back in Patterson.
Yeah.
We see them at the beginning before Andy decides to move on, but they're back in Patterson.
Right. It isn't the whole ensemble does not go to Maine. There wouldn't be any point in Edna being there. I mean, there's hardly any point in Edna being in the books at all, except, for laughs, because she doesn't really do anything.
Here's a spoiler alert.
I mean, and Willie has the whole dog thing that he has to run. So it's really Marcus and Andy and
Corey. Here's a spoiler alert. At the beginning of Best in Snow, the next book, Edna gets engaged.
No.
Yes.
Are you going to retire her?
It's going to upend the literary world when Edna gets married. It's
wow, I love that.
A major literary event of the season. Yeah.
We'll be talking about it on the left bank.
We're not going to make it easy for her, right? There have to be.
She and her husband are going to travel a lot, but she's okay with it because she has a lot of vacation time built up in her mind. So, and she doesn't do any work anyway, so Andy's fine with it.
A lot of the comments I'm seeing
here. You go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just going to say we have to go all the way back to the first book when Andy is able to establish an independent income, or none of the rest of this would work. I mean, if he didn't have enough money to be professionally retired or to, eat $36 lobster rolls without charging his client and all the rest of it.
Here's how lucky I am. That works great for me that he's rich. He got the money in book one. His father left it to him, and his father had gotten it in a dishonorable way. So at the beginning of book two, I had decided that Andy was going to return the money. And then I decided it would be funnier if charities start coming to Andy, weird charities, and Andy could deal with them. And so for the jokes, I had him keep the money, right? And it turned out to be fortuitous because now he could do whatever he wants.
Absolutely. I mean, if he were really chained down to having to maintain an income stream, you couldn't do all this fun stuff. I'm sorry, Patrick, carry on.
No, I was just going to say that a lot of the comments are just, people that, your books make people feel so good. That's the sense I'm getting. One lady saying, I'm always comforted to hear that there are going to be 2 books in a year. Just general comments about how much your fans appreciate your books and how much they love them. But as far as questions, yeah, there's some more here. Well, Kim says, good for Edna. And then Celeste says, will Andy throw her a big wedding? He's rich and probably happy to see her off.
No, because her husband is rich. Her future husband is rich. So there's no need for that.
Will you write more Doug Brock?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I like those books a lot, actually. But they just, I'm typecast now as the dog writer. And so they didn't sell nearly as well as the Andy books or the K-Team books. And I think 3 was enough.
They were really very good books. I thought the plots in them were terrific. Although my very favorite plot idea that you came up with outside of all of this was the guy that worked in New York and commuted to New Jersey.
That was
it's a great book.
Heart of a Killer. I like that book.
Yeah.
I like those books a lot, the standalones a lot, except for the first 2 were okay. I like the ones after that a lot. I was more proud of them than the Andy books because they felt like more real writing. Like it wasn't, it was 3rd person, past tense. It was, it was more a traditional book than Andy talking, because that's just me talking, and that sort of feels not cheating, but it's easier. But those books were, I was actually surprised I was able to do it, and I liked them a lot. I really did.
So did we. They were wonderful. And I miss you driving into our parking lot and all the dogs coming to your events. And then before you moved to Maine and you could do it, you would always take a dog and drive home to California, I mean, I love the fact that David would adopt a dog right there in the bookstore and take it away.
I feel like I'm there. Like I said, I moved at the last minute because of the thunderstorm into the guest house and never turned the air conditioner on. So I'm feeling like I'm in Scottsdale, it's like really warm in here.
I sympathize, but we won't keep you much longer because I don't want you to expire and not be able to meet your book contract. Is there anything else, Patrick, that we should ask?
Yeah. A couple of people mentioned your nonfiction, the memoirs, dog tripping and so forth. Barbara and I, and I'm sure a lot of your readers remember when you made that epic trip across the country. And man, have you thought about doing any more nonfiction memoir related books?
No, I did dog tripping, obviously, and then Lessons from Tara, which is sort of a sequel to Dog Tripping without the trip, is actually a book I like much better and didn't do nearly as well.
Really?
Yeah, but I that's maybe my favorite book I've ever written. But I'm out of dog stuff. I put everything about our rescue in those 2 books. I really have nothing else. So, and I'm not a dog expert in any sense. I'm much more of a dog lunatic. So all I really know about them is my interactions with them and our life with them and our rescue and so on. So I'm just not qualified to write anything else, to add anything to the public discourse on it. So no, I'm not planning to.
Unless you make another epic trip for some reason.
God forbid, Barbara. Okay.
You're settled into Maine, right?
If I see an RV, I recoil if I see it on the street. I have like RV PTSD, right? I mean, I can't stand the idea. So no, that'll never happen. No more epic trips.
Did you have dogs before you had Tara? I mean, Tara was the dog that really changed your life.
Yeah, Tara was Debbie's dog. I only lived with Tara for 6 months. And after 3 months, she got cancer. And then it took 3 months for her to pass away. I always had one dog. And, as a kid and as an adult, I always had one dog. I was not a dog maniac in those days. I mean, I liked them, but, I went over the deep end after Tara.
Let's see. There's a question about why were the Andy books not picked up as a series? I'm assuming a TV series. Is there any news there?
There was no news there. They got fairly close at one point, as a series, but I mean, I can't speak for why, but I don't think it's edgy enough. You know, I mean, if you
All
see
the
what's
dog actors are on strike.
dog actors on strike, I think I don't mean that the Andes are worthy of it, but I think the dog the dog aspect is so popular that I personally think would make sense. But I wrote the pilot, and it attracted a big time producer, and then the networks didn't buy it.
Wow.
Well, that might change. And, you know, it is difficult working. There are all kinds of rules about working with pets, you know, and stage sets. You can't, it's like babies, you know, you can't do the same thing with pets that you can do with people.
The really aggravating thing that happened to me was Steve Carell signed to produce and star in Dog Tripping, a movie version. And
He'd be great.
it still never got made. Yeah, he'd be perfect. And it still never
Yeah.
got. So that was
And
pretty.
then you have all these CGI dogs, which just aren't the same,
Right.
you know?
Well, you never know. You know, sometimes it looks like it'll never happen, and then something or other, some person normally suddenly gets inspired. So it's not off the table.
No, but having been in that side of the business, the movie business, a writer has just no control. So you just give it over your agent, and if it happens, it happens, and you can't micromanage. Believe me, it's just can't be done.
Well, you're busy enough. So, you know, if you do sell to the movies, probably as screenwriters, you know, not you, would be the way to go anyway.
Right.
Otherwise, you can't produce 3 books a year, and that would be terrible. So
Right.
you
And
can't have that.
And football season is coming up.
Well-
Someone just said that the K team would be great for TV too.
It would. Yeah, I think so too. There's a little more action involved. We need to let David go before the heat just kills him. So I want to say thank you. It's always a treat. I look forward every July to talking to you, and hopefully we'll set this up again in October so we can talk about Best in Snow. Do you know that we actually had snow in Scottsdale last winter? I have a picture. We had a snowdrift out among our cactus. It was really exciting.
I saw an event you did with Bill Clinton, James Patterson, and was it Lee Child?
Yep.
So this must have been a big deal for you tonight.
Well, you know what? Every
You guys
event
are
has its
amateurs.
own personality, and you know, you'll notice that it was Lee Child, not me, interviewing Bill Clinton and Jim Patterson. I was just a spectator, and so was Patrick. So it was a wonderful event. I thought that all of them were amazing and very cordial and interesting and the whole bit. But it was interactive in a different sense than talking to you. So, you know, I love the fact that Zoom allows us this whole spectrum. So, you know, if they were all the same, it wouldn't be any fun to do it.
You hit the big time tonight, Barbara.
We did. Well, we always hit the big time with you, David. That's the way I look at it. Thank you for signing the books. Dog Eat Dog is an absolute joy. This is truly one of my very favorite of the Andy Carpenters, and it really is right up there among my very favorite books for July, which says a lot because this is a really big July this year with a lot of terrific books. So
It is a
don't
great
miss it.
cover too.
Yeah, it is. And forget the donuts. Just substitute lobster for donuts and it'll all make more sense. But this is just, you know, when you just want to have a wonderful weekend or kick back at the beach or just, you know, kind of escape, this is the right book. It's absolutely wonderful. And, you know, it'll test your brain too, because if you can figure out where it's going before you get there, good for you. Yay. Anyway, good night, David. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks,
So long,
Robert.
Barbara.